Welcome to Auto News Talk. I'm your host, and today we are looking at a collision of forces in the industry that feels less like a market trend and more like a physics problem. It's essentially the unstoppable object meeting the immovable wall.
It really is a perfect storm.
Yeah,
We are seeing a level of tension in the automotive sector right now that we, frankly, just haven't seen in years.
right. Because on one side, you have the customer, and their patience is absolutely wearing thin. I mean, we're talking razor thin margins for error here.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the actual machinery behind the scenes, both the literal chips that go into the cars and the financial machinery required to actually buy them, is getting way more expensive, more complicated, and honestly just much harder to manage.
I've been calling it a friction crisis.
Yeah.
We are seeing this squeeze happen from the manufacturing line all the way down to the Google review page.
Exactly.
If you are in the business of selling or servicing cars right now,
Yeah.
the buffer zone is gone. You can't just rely on having inventory sitting on the lot anymore. You have to rely on process.
And that is exactly the terrain we are walking through today on Auto News Talk. We are going to map this out carefully for you. We'll start with what we're calling the trust deficit that's happening in the used car market right now. We've got some numbers to go through regarding disputes that are pretty alarming.
Very alarming.
Hmm.
Then we need to zoom out to the global supply chain, because there is a hidden war for resources involving artificial intelligence that is quietly but very aggressively driving up the cost of building cars.
Which is a connection I genuinely didn't see coming until we started putting this segment together.
Right.
And finally, we will look at how smart dealers are actually trying to smooth out these bumps, whether that's using technology to personalize a warranty or literally installing a charger at a customer's house.
It's all connected. It's basically becoming a game of transparency or bust.
Let's get right into the fiction point. I want to start with the mood of the consumer. If you feel like people are complaining more than they used to, you are not imagining things.
No, you're really not.
We have a report here from the Motor Ombudsman, and it paints a pretty stark picture of what's going on out there.
It does. The headline number from that report is a 14% increase in used car disputes compared to the previous year. Now, just to give that some scale, we are talking about a market with nearly 8 million transactions.
That is a massive amount of metal changing hands.
It is. But here is the kicker with the Ombudsman data. Despite that huge volume, used cars now account for 40% of all the cases opened with them.
40%. That's disproportionately high, right? Because new cars break too. Why is the heat so heavily concentrated on used inventory?
Well, you'd naturally assume it's because used cars are just clunkers, right?
Yeah.
And sure, the report shows that mechanical faults do make up 35% of the issues, specifically engine failures, which are obviously incredibly expensive and highly emotional for a buyer. But that's not actually the number one cause.
Wait, it's not the engine blowing up?
No. The number one driver, accounting for a full 40% of cases, is customer service.
Customer service. So
Right.
it's not just that the car broke, it's how the dealer handled the situation when it broke.
It's the silence. The report specifically calls out things like slow or absent responses to queries, or things like undeclared vehicle modifications that the buyer only discovers later. It's basically the ghosting of the customer after the check clears.
That is incredibly frustrating. And what this Ombudsman data doesn't really tell us is the actual financial penalty per dealer when these disputes happen. But we do know it damages the brand.
Absolutely.
And that connects perfectly to another set of data we have from the Startline used car tracker survey, because this one really zooms in on the real-world consequences of that bad service.
Right.
If you think a bad interaction just ends with one angry customer driving away, this data suggests otherwise.
Yeah. Startline found that reputation is basically everything now. They found that 62% of buyers cite poor online ratings as a major red flag, one that would make them reconsider a purchase entirely.
62%. That is the majority of your potential market just vanishing before they even set foot on the lot.
And here is the really interesting nuance in that survey. It's not just the overall star rating they care about. 61% of people say they're actively turned off by slow or unresponsive communications.
Wow. So it's the exact same story told from two different angles. The Ombudsman sees official disputes because of bad communication, and Startline sees lost sales on the front end because of bad communication.
Exactly. And the Startline data goes even deeper into the physical showroom experience. 49% of respondents said they'd be put off by dirty or unappealing premises, and 46% cited disinterested staff.
Ouch. Disinterested stuff. That one has to hurt if you're a dealer principal.
It does. But what it shows is that trust is built cumulatively. You might fix the engine addressing that mechanical fault we mentioned earlier, but if your showroom is messy and your sales staff is staring at their phones ignoring the customer, the deal dies before it even starts.
Right.
The transparency gap is exactly where you lose the sale.
Now, what the Startline survey doesn't answer is how long it actually takes a dealer to rebuild that reputation once the damage is out there online. But we know it's not quick.
It takes years.
So on one hand, we have customers demanding absolute perfection and transparency. But here is the twist. Delivering that perfection is getting much harder because the vehicles themselves are getting drastically harder to build.
This is where we really have to zoom out to the global picture.
Let's talk about the invisible squeeze. We are looking at an analysis detailing a massive global memory chip crunch. And the culprit behind this isn't what you'd expect. It's not a pandemic hangover. It's not a shipping canal blockage.
No.
It's AI.
This is one of those ripple effects that very few people in automotive saw coming. We all know that artificial intelligence data centers are exploding right now. Tech giants are building them everywhere. Well, those data centers require massive amounts of memory chips, specifically DRAM and NAND chips.
Let's quickly break that down for the listener. DRAM is basically a short-term memory, right? It's about processing speed.
Yeah.
And NAND is the long-term storage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Modern cars desperately need both. But the major suppliers in the world, companies like Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, they are rational businesses. They are actively reallocating their manufacturing capacity away from other things and toward these high-margin AI infrastructure parts.
I saw a specific detail in the report about Micron that really drove this reality home. They are actually closing down their crucial consumer RAM brand.
Right. That is a massive signal to the market. They are literally walking away from consumer-grade stuff to feed the AI beast.
So where does that leave the auto industry? Because modern cars aren't exactly analog anymore. They aren't just gears and oil.
Far from it. They are essentially data centers on wheels at this point. Micron estimates that recently the average vehicle carried about 90 gigabytes of memory.
90 gigabytes.
Yeah. But with all the new driver assistance tech, the massive infotainment screens and software-defined features, they expect that number to triple.
So, the demand for memory in cars is tripling at the exact same time the supply is being diverted to AI servers. That sounds like a long-term structural problem, not just a temporary blip.
It's certainly a recipe for much higher costs. We've seen reports indicating that Ford's CFO has come out and said they have secured their supply for now, but they are actively planning for higher costs moving forward.
And it's not just Ford dealing with this. The analysts are seeing signs of panic buying across the entire auto sector.
Which is a completely natural reaction. If you're an automaker, the absolute last thing you want is a factory full of unfinished cars just because you couldn't get a basic memory chip. So you buy up stock early, which of course drives the prices up even further for everyone else.
Right.
And if memory gets expensive, vehicle prices go up. Or automakers have to complicate their trim mixes. Maybe they have to remove certain features from lower-end models just because they can't afford to put the chips in them.
And that lands right back in the dealer's lap. Now, the dealer has to explain to that customer, who we already know from the Startline data, is skeptical, impatient, and reading online reviews why the car costs more or why it doesn't have the cool feature they saw in the TV commercial.
It just creates more friction points in the sales process.
What this chip analysis leaves open, though, is exactly when this capacity constraint is going to level out. It could be years.
Nobody knows for sure.
So let's pivot. We have costs rising because of this chip war, and trust is incredibly fragile because of service complaints. So how do dealers keep the lights on? How do they actually keep sales moving? This brings us to the Finance and Insurance Office, or F&I.
The F&I office has always been the profit engine of the dealership, but the landscape is shifting rapidly there too. We're looking at a report on dealership F&I strategies, and it shows that the market is definitely cooling from those crazy post-pandemic highs.
The report called the new approach a deliberate omnichannel strategy. Now, omnichannel is one of those corporate buzzwords that usually means nothing to a normal person. What does it actually look like in practice for a car buyer?
It essentially means moving the conversation out of the box. The report shows that while 62% of dealers still saw F&I growth, the number of dealers seeing significant growth, meaning over 10%, dropped sharply.
So the wind has gone out of the sails a bit.
It has. And the primary headwind they're facing is affordability.
Which makes sense with the rise in car prices we just talked about.
Exactly. Customers are looking at the base monthly payment and saying, I simply cannot add anything else to this. The report noted that the perceived lack of value for F&I products was cited more than twice as often as it was the previous year.
So the old school hard sell, sitting in a tiny room while someone pressures you into buying a warranty, isn't going to work if the customer literally does not have the budget for it.
Correct. The strategy is shifting away from overcoming objections at the end of the deal and moving toward early education at the very start of the process.
I notice a stat in there that highlights this shift. 63% of dealers are now providing robust F&I information online.
That's the omnichannel part in action. You let the customer learn about the extended warranty or the GAP coverage on their phone, sitting on their couch at home, long before they ever sit down in the finance office.
And here is where technology comes back into the story in a really interesting way. We just talked about AI causing the chip shortage and driving prices up. But here, AI is actually being used to help solve the problem. The strategy report mentions that about 8% of dealers are now actively using AI to personalize their F&I menus.
This is a incredibly promising development, even if it's still early days. Instead of a one-size-fits-all pitch where you try to sell every single product to every single person, the AI looks at the customer's specific profile and matches the coverage to their actual risk.
So if I'm buying a highly complex, software-defined car with 300 gigabytes of memory chips in it, the AI might specifically suggest a tech protection warranty rather than just a generic powertrain one.
Exactly. And that is crucial because despite the affordability crunch, buyers do still want protection. The data shows steady demand for GAP coverage and protection against high-tech repairs.
Because they know these cars are basically spaceships now.
Right. They know the repairs are going to be astronomical. They just need to understand the value of the protection before they feel the immense pressure of the final signature.
It's about transparency again, showing them the why before you ask them for the how much.
That is realistically the only way to win in this tight affordability environment.
Now, what the F&I research doesn't fully answer is the adoption rate among the smaller independent mom-and-pop lots versus the big, massive franchise groups. But the trend is clear.
Very clear.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the problems, the complaints, the rising costs, the complexity. I want to talk about a tangible solution, a real-world example of how technology can actually remove friction instead of just adding to the bill.
This is a great example of solving what we call the last mile problem.
We're looking at details on a new platform from a company called JumpTech, and this is specifically designed for the EV market.
Right. And we know that selling an electric vehicle has its own unique set of frictions. The customer might say, I love how the car drives, but how on earth do I charge it at my house?
It's the number one hesitation. And historically, the dealer just hands them a flyer for a local electrician and says, good luck, hope it works out.
Which creates massive handover delays. The customer won't actually take delivery of the car until the charger is physically installed. JumpTech is a platform trying to digitize and streamline that entire mess.
So how does their platform actually work?
It connects the dealer, the installer, and the energy retailer into one single workflow. So when a lead comes into the dealer's CRM system, it gets routed directly to partners who handle the site survey and the actual installation.
So the dealer can actively see the status of the installation.
Yes, it offers an end-to-end view from the initial inquiry all the way to a fully commissioned charger. No more black holes of information where the dealer's just guessing.
And they are expanding this offering, right? It's not just for the giant manufacturer networks anymore.
That's the big news in this source. They are rolling out to independent retailers with a pretty aggressive offer. It's a £799 all-in package that actually includes the hardware.
That is huge for a used car dealer trying to sell a secondhand EV. To be able to look the buyer in the eye and say, the car is this much, and for exactly £799, we handle the entire charger installation guaranteed.
It completely changes the conversation. And think back to our very first topic, the Ombudsman and Startline data on customer service complaints.
Yeah.
One of the biggest friction points is communication. By tracking the installer's performance against service-level agreements within the JumpTech platform, the dealer avoids being the bad guy when the electrician is running late.
It effectively outsources the headache, but keeps the visibility.
Exactly. It directly answers that customer service complaint by using a platform to ensure reliability and communication.
Now, what the platform details don't really address is what happens when a customer's older home needs a massive, expensive electrical panel upgrade before they can even install the charger. That's still a hurdle.
True, the infrastructure realities are still there.
But the process is vastly improved. So what does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground here on Auto News Talk today. We've got unhappy customers ghosted by dealers, scarce chips getting eaten by AI, evolving F&I strategies, and new logistical platforms for EVs. How do we synthesize all of this?
I think there are two main themes colliding across all these reports. The first one is the cost of complexity.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, look at the memory chip crunch from our second source.
Yeah.
We know cars are becoming data centers on wheels. That inherently makes them expensive to build, but it directly connects to the F&I report. Because the cars are so complex, customers are terrified of repair bills. They absolutely need that warranty protection.
So the technological complexity drives the manufacturing cost up, but it also drives the consumer's need for the after-sale protection product.
Right. As cars get smarter, they get riskier to own financially. That's a fundamental structural change in the market.
And what's the second theme you're seeing?
I'd call it the visibility imperative.
The need for the customer to see everything.
Yes. If you contrast the Motor Ombudsman's warning about undeclared modifications and dealers ghosting customers, and you combine that with the Startline data about how fast buyers flee from bad reviews, the picture is clear.
The dealers who hide things get hammered.
Exactly. The dealers getting destroyed in the reviews are the ones hiding the vehicle history or hiding behind slow emails. The winners, like those using the JumpTech platform for chargers or the early online F&I menus, are the ones making the invisible processes visible to the buyer.
It really is transparency or bust.
And there's a fascinating tension here that I don't want us to skip over, specifically regarding AI.
Oh, right. Let's hear it.
It's the dual role of AI in this whole narrative. On one hand, according to the chip report, AI is the villain. The insatiable demand for AI data centers is causing the supply shortage that is driving up costs and hurting the auto industry.
Right. It's stealing the resources.
But on the other hand, AI is the hero. It's the exact tool dealers are using in the F&I office to personalize menus and save deals. And it's the intelligence behind digital platforms that streamline complex logistics. So technology is causing the physical supply problem, but technology is also the only viable solution to the sales problem.
That's actually kind of poetic in a very stressful, business-oriented way.
It really is.
So bringing it all home, what is a practical takeaway for you, the listener, today? If you're running a dealership or managing a sales team right now, what do you actually do with all this information?
I think the most practical takeaway is that the hard sell is officially dead.
Yeah.
Affordability is simply too tight. You cannot pressure someone who does not have the extra money in their monthly budget. The new model to survive this is education and logistics.
Education and logistics.
You have to teach the customer why they need protection because the car is a rolling computer, and you have to logically solve their infrastructure problems,
Right.
like getting the EV charger installed. You have to be a partner in the process, not just a vendor pushing metal.
I love that framing. It's about shifting from selling to solving.
That is exactly where the smart money in the market is going.
Well, that is incredibly insightful, but before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought, a question to chew on.
Let's hear it.
We talked about how the Startline data shows 62% of buyers will walk away because of a bad online review. In a market where a single bad review can permanently cost you future sales, ask yourself this. Are you using your dealership's technology to hide your operational flaws, or are you using it to highlight your process and build trust?
That is the million-dollar question right there.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on Auto News Talk. We will see you next time.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.